First, here are a few glimpses of some of those buildings which have meant the Leys to all Leysians until October 1940. Around the main quad stands the hall, the block containing A and B, the King's Building, always known as KB, and the chapel, where set in the east wall is the War Memorial. Next to the chapel stands the headmaster's house, overlooking the deer park with the chapel on one side and East House, the most modern of the 5 houses, on the other. A most important building, the tuck shop, where you could buy anything from a penny bar to a bicycle. The swimming bath, the only indoor bath in Cambridge, and finally a drain pipe, which though to newcomers is simply incredible, means so much to those who contemplated it on so many early mornings. In the days when we had peace and leisure to make Speech Day a real event, it was preceded by the annual inspection of the corps. And here is Major General Priestman walking round on the last full peacetime inspection. The march past was headed by the drums, or in modern musical language, the rhythm section. When we were told that the school buildings were to be taken over and that the Leys was to go north, a hastily summoned party of masters and boys met at Cambridge to tackle the gigantic task of packing up the school. Then the great trek began, and the school started its long journey north. Through the night and through the day, the trains rattled haltingly on. Do you remember? 7:30 and still south of Carlisle, and someone had said that we'd get in at 7:20. Perhaps he meant in the evening. Just railway and more railway until the Atholl Palace became a mythical castle. This shot cost us our second-best cameraman. And then we saw it for the first time, but it seemed miles before the train finally stopped and we were really there. As each train moved north, it picked up a succession of parties for the Leys School, Pitlochry, through a maze of uncertain connections, on chaotic stations at little-known hours in the morning, and at a time when the railways were at their most disorganised, we were brought so that only one boy was temporarily laid and no one was irrevocably lost. Probably unwashed, almost certainly tired and hungry, we all gave in our tickets at the end. The credit for the organisation of this journey belongs to Mr. Hayward, here seen counting his safely hatched chickens. From this bus, packed with a curious mob and its associated baggage, we caught our first glimpse of Pitlochry and formed our first and probably erroneous impressions. Then the entrance, looking for once just like the photograph in the prospectus, and so up the drive, for the first time, past the waterfall, here seen comparatively empty. All this was new, and it looked as if it was going to be a long, long way when we had to walk. Then at last the hotel. Seems big. Oh look, ducks. The fountain wasn't frozen when we first came, but don't let that worry you, the hotel was there just the same. It's wonderful what one horse can pull up a hill when it really puts its mind to it, and when the trunks are unpacked, away to the garage they go. Everyone has his own idea of the best way to carry them. This was the strange new land in which we found ourselves. Taking as our landmarks the hotel and the peak of Benvrachy, we set out to explore. It wasn't long before we had established bases in this new land. The mascot, York, you never know what he can do you for until it's too late. When we'd explored the town, our thoughts turned to the mountain we soon came to regard as our own preserve, Benvrachy. Those who were more ambitious ventured further afield and found peaks like Benny Glow waiting for them. The Tunnel Falls are very different from the calm of Barnes Pool or Grunchester Meadows. Here is Black Spout, and there's the head prefect. Good morning, John. Makes you feel wet to watch it.
Corrier Brook was luckily there to take the overflow of masters and their families protected by the ever-watchful British Iron. Ben Vracky has been defeated almost ignominiously by boys of all sizes, but can still make an imposing picture. There is the path, and there in the distance is Vracky. It's thirsty going in hot weather, and there are steep places to climb. At least, that's how the camera saw it. That effort obviously calls for refreshment, and then with the summit conquered, back to a bath, or perhaps to read with Mr. Skinner the second book of Kings. When we got up on the first morning of the second term, it was only 6 degrees Fahrenheit, and even the fountain was frozen. For weeks, rugger was no more than a vague possibility in a doubtful future, and we became winter sports enthusiasts. The old hands appeared triumphantly on skis, whilst many of the rest skated on the swimming pool. We even reached the stage of playing unofficial ice hockey house matches, but we couldn't have been very good, as all the referees survived. If you couldn't skate, there was always sledging, and a cameraman can usually find somebody to be spectacular. First the headmaster, the remainder in no more order than a combination of scissors and film cement can accidentally produce. Mr. Green and Mr. Moore discuss ATC matters with a colleague. The clergy, Mr. Skinner and Mr. Harvey. Mr. and Mrs. Sandbach. Mr. Bye and JMC Pinkham, the editor of the Fortnightly and the original commentator. Mr. Gillard, producer of school plays. Mr. Moore and Mr. Sanders in summer sunshine. And Mr. Wright and Mr. Harvey in winter snow. Good afternoon to you, Mr. Morris. And to you, Mrs. Morris. Not, of course, forgetting the heir, Richard Morris. Mr. Green with his hockey. Mr. Mellor with his camera. Mr. Buchanan's unusually shy, and Mr. Watson, the school engineer. But where's that pipe? Ah, that's better. Mr. Gico presides over the tuck shop, which used to supply the schoolboys every fancy. This building was the tennis pavilion. This from Mrs. Sterling. Note that, gentlemen of the jury, it said no parking, or did it? Well, maybe the cameraman hasn't been quite fair in presenting the evidence. Here we take you back for a moment to show you the Corps, then still known as the OTC, getting on parade at Cambridge. There are 2 cadet under-officers, an almost extinct species nowadays. And this is how the Corps, now known as the JTC, does it at Pitlochry. The commanding officer, Mr. Rose, and Company Sergeant Major Wason. A fine body of men. Although the ATC had no uniforms, they had a ceremonial parade in honour of a visit by the Commandant for Scotland, here seen inspecting the sections, followed by Commanding Officer Mr. Green.
We have been very fortunate in being able to use the West Church of Pitlochry for our Sunday morning services. Well, it's 3 minutes to 11 and about time to be moving inside, all except for one poor prefect who has to remain behind to keep out well-meaning gate crashers. Concluding the long climb back are Miss Skinner and Mr. Vinnie.
Mr. Hayward and Mr. Hughes, West Housemasters. Mrs. Humphrey is said to have done much for the morale of the headmaster. Goodbye, Mr. Chips. Mr. and Mrs. Harvey are just about to tackle a long climb which Sister and Miss Weir, the new cook, have just surmounted. Now these boys were in a class by themselves, and this was the unhappy man who had to teach them. Mr. Sandbach shows how it should be done, but some of the prefects have other ideas. Mr. Ayres relaxes. This is what a cruel system makes us do every conceivable morning in winter under the eye of Sergeant Major Willard. Take the time from the front. Thank goodness that's over. Rugger, cricket and hockey pitches have all had to be made out of the hotel's Mashie golf course. This was an encounter between masters and boys, and it was meant to be soccer. But although it would have made even Aston Villa's A-team cry to see it, a good time was had by all. The hockey team practicing. They had to be kept in a cage and were only let out when Mr. Green was there to keep an eye on them. They were wild because they could only play 3 matches, but they won all of them, beating Edinburgh University 4-0. Most people had to play rugger in the Easter term as well as in the winter, when the weather allowed. A line out. Watch this movement. Tackle him low. Try, Gibbon. He'll never make it, or will he? Yes, it's over. Or was it? And finally, here are some shots taken in our first summer term at Pitlochry. Hello, this is very energetic for a summer day. What's all the hurry about? Oh, I know, it must be the tuck shot, and what they hope will still be on those shelves when they get there. Who said there were no cues in Pitlochry? The modern alchemist prepares his mysterious and wonderful potions. The young scientist is never happy if he's not using a Kipps apparatus. Not content with enjoying its perfume himself, he feels the urge to spread the delightful odour to others by placing it outside under their classroom windows. We don't like admitting it, but we've had to play a version of rounders. The nondescripts play cricket against the masters and service, and Mr. Moore pads up. Mr. Ayres comes in and soon breaks his duck, in spite of the speed of the bowling and the fierceness of the bowlers. The patriarch of the still room. The nondescript captain in action. But Mr. Hughes produces what might have been the winning hit, but wasn't. All the same, everyone seems very happy about it. And here are some views of a tennis match against Dollar, which we won in spite of the fact that players went all bashful in front of the camera. This is what it looked like from the ground, but our cameraman gets his own angle on things. The Pitlochry Lido is open all summer and winter too if it's not icebound. The facilities include sunbathing and occasionally wrestling as well. And there, for the present, we leave the Leys in its wartime home, not discontented with its lot, but still remembering the days that are gone. Not where the Tummel grandly flows her son shall ever think of her, but where the quiet Granter goes unruffled down from Grantchester. There do her well-loved buildings stand, the visions of another Leys, and in this lovely alien land we wistfully remember these. Forsan et haec olim meminisse juvabit. These things formerly used to have been forgotten.